Hi, I'm Cole Spivey. I'll be reading from Backstage. The article is Beyond the Camera, How 14 Famous Directors Worked with Actors, and it was published by Brianna Rodriguez and Backstage, November 21st, 2017 at 1 p.m. So it's been on Backstage for quite a bit of time. Every actor craves a dexterous director, someone to trust with creating a safe creative space to guide a performance, to speak actor, and to build something worthy in the editing room. What follows is a brief examination of the masters, who developed their own cinematic languages, giving us iconic visual compositions, and mostly important, developing great, if not long-lasting relationships with their cast, plus how they did it. Where some began as actors and transitioned behind the scenes, others juggled both roles. Here we examine the links between them, their personal approaches to the actor, and their major contribution to the cinema, and that word was contribution. Learn about Wes Anderson's on-set vibe, Ava DuVernay's knack for cultivating intimacy, and Jean-Luc Godard's, and that's Jean-Luc Godard, guerrilla approach to shooting, and maybe which type of direction you respond to and why. For historical and periodic context, as well as to better be able to make correlations between some revered directors and their predecessors, we listed them in chronological order based on the year they released their first feature film. The list is small smattering of some of those who paved the road for those who came after. So there's a lot of lists. I'm going to show you some of them, and I'm going to show you the one I chose. I was going to do Alfred Hitchcock, but I'm going to go ahead and choose Stanley Kubrick. Here's the long list that they have on Backstage for this article. Okay, so I'll also, just in case, I know I've done this a few times and it's kind of hard to see, but the list that they're allowing you to click on to do further research on how they approach directing was Alfred Hitchcock, 1925 to 1976. We have William Wyler from 1926 to 1970. We have Orson Welles, 1938 to 1984. We have Akira Kurosawa from 1943 to 1998. We have Elia Kazan, which is 1945-1976. We do have Stanley Kubrick, 1953 to 1999. Andrei Tarkovsky from 1956 to 1986. Jean-Luc Godard, 1960 to present day. We have Mike Nichols from 1967 to 2007. We have David Lynch from 1977 all the way to present day. Spike Lee is presented here from 1983 to present day. Quentin Tarantino is 1992 to present day, probably one of our newer ones. Wes Anderson, 1996, also very new to present day. And then Ava DuVernay, which I might peek at. She's 2010 to present. I'm not real familiar with her work. I think I have heard of it. I'm going to take a little break, so go do something that you want to do, and I'm looking her up right now. She's the only one that okay, yeah. I've heard some things about this lady. She was born in Long Beach. She's an American filmmaker and film distributor. She won the directing award in the U.S. Dramatic Competition at the 2012 Sundance Film Festival for a second feature. I think this is kind of what the article is getting at. Her first name is Ava. I believe it's DuVernay. The following year, she co-wrote and directed a Netflix drama, When They See Us, based on the Central Park Jogger case. A Wrinkle in Time. I'm trying to figure out. Oh, did she direct Selma? Oh, she directed Selma with a $20 million budget. Something called 13th, A Wrinkle in Time. Something to do with Saturday Night Live. I guess she did something. Oh no, Saturday Night Life. The Door. Some short films. Say Yes. Queen Sugar for television. Okay, I don't know why she's mentioned with these other directors. I guess because of Selma. But I am not going to be reading upon her list. She did get a Peabody Award for 13th. So it seems like they see her as a very important director. All of these directors are very important, but the one I'm going to focus on, of course, is Stanley Kubrick. Okay, so Stanley Kubrick stopped directing in 1999. I think he stopped due to death. So he's been described as an obsessive, complicated, controlling perfectionist, according to Malcolm McDowell, who starred in A Clockwork Orange in 1971. Kubrick often didn't know what he wanted, but he knew what he didn't. His approach to filmmaking was thus that anyone who wishes to understand just how dedicated he was to the process needed only to look at the care he took to make sure it came across the way he intended it when he came to the elements like lighting, costumes, color grading. See below a letter, and they're showing a letter that was sent to the projectionist screening of the 1975 Barry Lyndon. Okay. So he sent a letter to, I guess, to the projectionist. Okay. The letter has a letterhead, as you can see here. Trying to see the best so that you can see it. And then it says, Dear Projectionist. Okay. So he entitled the letter, Dear Projectionist. Okay. I don't know what good this did him as a director. I don't know if the projectionist gave the letter to someone else. But Barry Lyndon, obviously, I believe, worked with Stanley Kubrick very closely. So he probably needed this letter to get to the projectionist. Kubrick was very, very crazy. A lot of these letters he would send to like his right-hand man, which was kind of like an assistant that he had met when there was a giant dildo that was delivered on set for, I believe, Clockwork Orange. It was a ceramic dildo or something like that. And that guy was an Italian man that was basically his helper throughout his entire life. And he gave him many letters about his pets and cats. He had these cats and things like that that he wanted to be taken care of. And a lot of these letters were the same. They didn't always have a letterhead, but they were typed. He would type all of his letters. It was very, very anal retentive. And this would be like, go to the grocery store and do these kinds of things. And there were a lot of misspellings, and he would cross out the misspellings and try to... But it says, December 8th, 1975, Dear Projectionist, an infinite amount of care was given to the lack of Barry Lyndon, the photography, the sets, the costumes, and in the careful color grading and overall lab qualities of the prints and the soundtrack. All of his work is now in your hands, and your attention to sharp focus, sound, good sound, and the careful handling of the film will make this effort worthwhile. Please also note the following. Number one. So this is to the projectionist, which I don't think that he could really do anything for this. So this letter was probably handed off to someone else. And it says, Reel 3B, changeover dots, error. A, the first changeover dot at the end of Reel 3B are correct. B, the last changeover dot at the end of Reel 3B are not correct. So all this is just insanity. Okay? This would not be, Spielberg probably didn't have letters like this, and it goes on and on, like Barry Lyndon was photographed in Barry Lyndon is the name of the film. Okay, yeah, right, okay, I see. Okay, I see now. Barry Lyndon is the name of the film, okay. He entitled it, it was Barry Lyndon was the title of the film that he was working on at the time, which was a major flop. It was a pretty big failure. And so he's talking about the color coding. I see. I'm learning now. So Stanley Kubrick directed Barry Lyndon, and this was about Barry Lyndon. Ryan O'Neal is in it, and Marissa. Those are the actors that are in it. I guess that was the stamp or whatever that would go onto the actual letterhead. It was a letterhead that he would send out. So the projectionist is reading, Barry Lyndon was photographed in a 1.6 aspect ratio. Please be sure you project it at this ratio and no event at less than 1.175. I guess this went to all projectionists. So a projectionist would get some kind of letter like this, and they would have to do it the way that the director wanted it to. Like number 9 says, part 2 runs for 1 hour and 22 minutes, 82 minutes. I don't know what that means. I guess, anyway. Number 10, hopefully you have been supplied with an LP record or a tape of the film score. Please use side 1 for the pre-film music. During the intermission, play side 2. Starting with a band 2, you can play this far as long as you want to the end of the record. If you play music after the film, repeat what you did on the intermission. So he was directing the projectionist or the cinema house how to behave during intermission or what to play during intermission. And this is unreal. This is an amazing letter. Number 5 says the first half of the film runs for 1 hour and 40. So he's really big about time on the film. Number 4 says Barry Lyndon runs for 3 hours and 40 minutes. Number 3, it says there should be no less than 15-foot Lamberts of the light of the screen. No, so there's a quality of no more than 18 or something. There's a quality of how the film should be shown. So he didn't just direct the film. Now recently, Quentin Tarantino did release Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and did release it in digital, but it was also shown in 35 millimeter at the Angelica in Dallas. So the directors are still kind of doing this. They want their film to be produced a certain way, or they want it to be color-coded a certain way, but they also want it to be presented at the theater or the cinema house a certain way. And a lot of directors, they just send it out there and they're just like, they're done. So directors are losing this type of control they have over the audience because of the fact that things are coming out on Netflix, or we have things out on, Amazon or whatever. You just press on a button and watch it, But they can still control the words. They can control how the actors behave in a certain sense. They can control a lot of that. But here, Stanley Kubrick is trying to control the environment of the cinema house and the projectionist and how he wants it to be projected a certain way. And that's above and beyond. He was a very dedicated director. And this is probably a letter that would go out to the projectionist. And I'm sure some of them it did affect how they tried to play it the best that they could. I'm sure nowadays it's just plain, it just plays on the, on the screen. It's interesting. It was well documented that Kubrick's methods for pulling performances out of actors were questionable at best. Shelley Duvall, for example, set the world record for the number of takes for one scene on a Stanley Kubrick film. It was 127 takes, where she fended off on The Shining co-star Jack Nicholson with a bat. She was so exhausted by the end of the film's year-long production, she reportedly started losing her hair. So he was actually kind of killing her. Kubrick always expected his cast to come prepared to deliver their choices. When McDowell asked for some direction on a specific scene, Kubrick responds, "I'm not RADA," referring to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. While the number of takes was out of the cast's control, evidently their choices weren't. If you were on Kubrick's set, it was because he trusted you to do the job, and it was his biggest requirement when casting. Ryan O'Neal, who appeared in Barry Lyndon, said he had a great vocabulary with actors when it came to communicating what he needed from them. Kubrick is one of the few directors whose canon expresses a beautiful trajectory in the maturation of an auteur. Considering going through his work chronologically, beginning with Fear and Desire, 1953, and ending with Eyes Wide Shut, 1999, which is a pretty good film. Some cinephiles would argue that Kubrick's singular approach doesn't crystallize until Paths of Glory in 1957, but take your pick and be the judge. I thought The Shining was his masterpiece, and of course, Full Metal Jacket, and I'm a big fan of Eyes Wide Shut. And I think nothing's better than The Shining that he's done. Of course, Clockwork Orange is not bad, and then of course, How to Love the Bomb. But anyway, pretty good little article about Kubrick, and then it also about directors. Thank you.